Today's Spotlight in Black History Month is on Zora Neale Hurston. Now, when I was coming up through school, her name was one that we heard often because her works are so prolific. And not only was she the most successful, but she was also probably the most significant Black female writer of the first half of the 20th century. And so it almost seems surreal to think that she might not be taught in American schools anymore. But that doesn't mean that her impact is gone. In fact, I feel like that means that it's more important to learn about her and to make sure her legacy continues. Zora was born in Alabama in 1891. When she was very young, her family moved to Eatonton, Florida. It was one of the very first all-Black towns incorporated in the United States. When she was 10, some teachers came to Eatonville and gave her some books, and she said that her mind just absolutely exploded with wonder. She realized quite young the impact that writing could have on people, and that's when things really clicked for her academically as well. Fortunately, her mother passed away just 3 years later. Her father remarried, but her new stepmother didn't seem very interested in keeping Zora around. She was sent to a boarding school in Jacksonville, Florida, but then her parents stopped paying her tuition, and so she was dismissed. She began working as a maid to try and essentially support herself, but she wanted to go back to school because that was who she was. She was an academic, and she wanted to be part of that particular way of life. After a few years, she was ready to go back to school. She went to night classes at Morgan Academy, but in order to qualify for free high school education, she had to be under the age of 18. Unfortunately, she was 26, so she lied about her age, said that she was 16, and then worked through the rest of her education and graduated in 1918. That same year, Zora decided that she wanted to go to college. She went to Howard University and was a first-generation college student. While there, she focused on languages. She took Spanish, English, Greek. She took a class on public speaking. She was the co-founder of The Hilltop, the university student newspaper, and she got really interested in anthropology, particularly thinking about the similarities between different ethnicities. While pursuing all of these passions, Zora still had to support herself, and she worked as a manicurist in the evenings. It didn't stop her from continuing her studies, didn't stop her from finding all of these things to explore and to learn about. And she caught the attention of one of the trustees at Barnard College of Columbia University. She was offered a scholarship in 1925 and was the only Black student in the women's college. While there, she decided to focus more on anthropology. She worked with several famous anthropologists doing ethnographic research, folks like Fran Boas and Margaret Mead, and she just learned as much as she possibly could. She graduated with her bachelor's in anthropology in 1928. After she graduated, one of her friends recommended Hurston to a philanthropist named Charlotte Osgood Mason, who had a history of supporting African-American authors like Langston Hughes while they were creating their pieces. She was offered $200 a month in order to travel the South for about 4 years. And while she was traveling, doing her anthropological studies, she was going to give Mason work that she collected about African-American music, folklore, hoodoo, all kinds of culture. When she wasn't in the South, she was in her Harlem apartment, being a linchpin of the Harlem Renaissance. Her friends, writers, Langston Hughes and Countee Cullen, would be at her apartment. It was kind of like the hot spot for the literary geniuses of the age. However, in the late 1920s and early 1930s, she immersed herself in her anthropological studies. She parlayed the information into several short stories, as well as her first novel, Jonas Gordon Vine, and a collection of Southern folklore, which was hugely received. Around this same time, she also established a School of Dramatic Arts at Bethune-Cookman University. She also spent time as a professor for the North Carolina Central University in Durham. There, she focused on Black folklore through theater and drama. And she noted that her students were really supportive of what she did because she had this vision, in her own words, that our drama must be like us or it doesn't exist. She wanted her students to see themselves in the art, and even continued this at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, unofficially, as the school is still segregated. In the late 1930s, she traveled to Jamaica and Haiti in order to research for a new project called Tell My Horse, which really didn't have a genre. It was anthropology, it was folklore, and it was storytelling. It was very much just Zora. And her anthropological way of looking things was something that transcended generations. For example, she published a book in 2018, many years after her death, called Barracoon, which was a deep dive, a look into the very last survivor, or the last known survivor of the transatlantic slave trade, named Cujo Lewis. And even though the book was written in 1931, people were just as enthralled by it in 2018 as they would have been at the time. By the late 1930s, though, Zora had hit the peak of her career. Her masterpiece, Their Eyes Were Watching Good, probably her most famous book, was published in 1937. Next year, a book called Tell My Horse, which was a study of Caribbean voodoo practices in 1938. And then Moses, Man of the Mountain in 1939. And then she published her own autobiography, Dust Tracks on a Road, in 1942. And that was when she finally started to get the praise that she deserved for her groundbreaking way of storytelling. She was profiled in Who's Who in America, 20th Century Authors, but she never really did get the financial recognition that she deserved. And this is, of course, mostly due to the fact that people didn't understand her at the time. Contrary to cultural norms, she focused on the Black female experience. She mixed anthropology with folk tales and with fiction and with truth. And she wrote in the way that African American people spoke, which was very uncommon for the day. There were some who thought that she was honestly making fun of African Americans by speaking in that way, when she was truly just trying to show her cultural heritage. She was a trailblazer for Black women's empowerment and refused to bow low before the white man. Her words. Another reason her works wouldn't catch on at the time. She believed that research is formalized curiosity. It's poking and prying with a purpose. And she fulfilled that purpose with all of her great works. Without the compensation that she deserved for her works, she died with very little money and didn't even have a proper gravestone until 1973. It simply reads, Zora Neale Hurston, a genius of the South.